Uh, so I'm a philosopher. I'm doing mostly political philosophy. I use a lot of Chinese materials, so that means that I know almost nothing about AI. But I've been asked to comment on the threat of AI from a Chinese philosophy perspective. I've learned along the way. So I only have 10 minutes. I'll run through my big ideas very quickly. So the first, idea I want to say, is that I think the threat of the AGI is exaggerated because to my very limited knowledge so far, AI has no intelligence whatsoever because human intelligence means that we can do whatever we want to do. But so far, AIs can only do what they are designed to do at best, right? And I think, you can say human agency, human dignity. I think a fundamental feature of that is that by nature we're not natural, right? We can go against any kind of nature we are imposed on, and but that's not necessarily a good thing, And I read an online quote that said that artificial intelligence is no match for human stupidity, right? So I think that's also human agency, but still in that sense, I think we are I mean, so far, I don't see anything comes close to the kind of intelligence that defines human beings. And so that's the first thing I like to make. And if that's the case, I think the obsession with the threat of AGI is distracting us from maybe more pressing problems like gene editing, like climate change. I think they're real. They're here already. So we're spending precious resources on things that are far from here yet, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, I mean, thinking about the perceived threat of AGI, or in general, science and technologies. From my very unempirical, unscientific observation, my sense is that, it seems that the Westerners tend to have this view that science and technology will bring doom to the human race. Whereas in East Asian countries, the view is quite different. If you look at science fictions, movies, Godzilla, from Japan is not created by science directly, right? And there are very famous Chinese, science fiction writers. One famous writer, Liu Cixin, he has this idea that the Earth is destroyed, but not by scientific development, but by the quick expansion of the sun, right? And so from my very unscientific observation, it seems that there's this difference, right? And so East Asians do not perceive the threat as much as Westerners. If that's the case, why there's this difference, right? My own speculations, there might be two reasons. First reason is that East Asians are doing the catch-up game, right? Catching up with the West in terms of modern science and technology. And because of that, modern science and technology is perceived as something the Westerners are good at. That's why we're left behind. So science and technology are good things, are not bad things. So probably that's one difference. And another reason is that for whatever reason, East Asian civilizations, really China was the dominant civilization in East Asia for thousands of years. In terms of all early major civilizations, I think the Chinese civilization was the only one that didn't have a creation myth. So didn't have a creator God. And by implication, because the world is not created by God, probably I shouldn't say this here. And sorry about that. So please forgive me for I'm just describing. So because there's no creator God, there's no destruction God either. There's no this kind of a big flooding story in early China. When Buddhism was introduced to China, that's a different story. But before Buddhism was introduced from India, we didn't have creation myth. The life just goes on forever. And so because of that, so probably this kind of dystopia, end of the world stories don't ring that strong among, generally speaking, kind of Chinese civilizations and the countries that are influenced by these kind of civilizations. And also for that matter, so early Chinese thinkers were not as metaphysical as ancient Greek and ancient Greek thinkers, because in a way, metaphysics is a secular version of theology, right? And so that's the first thing I'd like to say. I don't know how to change this page. Oh, okay. Right. And then as a philosopher, I still think that it's significant to reflect on AGI, because we philosophers are useless. We think about all these useless issues. Among philosophers, we talk about zombies, time travel, which are totally unrealistic. But I think those issues help us to clarify on some fundamental issues. So I think the reflection on AGI help us to think about the issue, what makes a human being, right? So the worry about AGI is that we're creating human beings, we're superhuman beings. But in order to say that, we need to understand what is a human, what is a human being. And I think Descartes, the European philosopher, think that language and reason are what distinguish us from animals. And if you think of that, then you can understand the worry from that tradition, because basically AlphaGo shows reason, ChatGPT shows language, right? So basically now we're taken over by these new masters. However, one thing I'm doing is Confucian philosophy. According to an important Confucian thinker, mentions what defines human being, what distinguishes us from beasts is our compassion, right? And only we human beings have compassion that distinguishes us from other animals. And I think in the Western tradition, there's this minority view that also takes passions to be very important. For example, David Hume said that throughout the Western philosophical tradition, they think reason is the most important, but actually it's not true. Really, passions are the most fundamental driving force. Reason is just a slave to our passion. And a contemporary neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, also argued that really reason is this newly developed thing for human beings, and emotions and some kind of simple things. I think that's one thing. Artificial intelligence or robots can still now do easily, like what I'm doing now, right? Grab a bottle of water, because that's developed through millions of years of evolution. Our reason only is through just 1 million, maybe a few 100,000 years of evolution. So so there are different understandings of what makes a human being, and then so if you think about this, Turing test, right? Turing test is basically based on Cartesian understanding of human beings, right? Whether the thing behind the in the black box can reason and speak like a human being, right? And so I'm thinking, there could be a Mencius kind of test instead, or mention test instead of Turing test. So we're going to see whether the thing behind in the black box can do like artificial morals, can exhibit artificial moral sentiment instead of this, reason and language. And also for Mencius, compassion is, we all have compassion, but it's just in this small beginning, and we can develop it further so that we can become more human, right? So human is not a cutoff line. You're either human or beast. You can degenerate into a beast. You can become more human than others. So it's not, black and white like the kind of Turing test would suggest, right? And then the next issue, about regulations. One thing we tend to say, we use rules, but we know rules are fundamentally inadequate, right? And we philosophers are good at challenging whatever rules you can come up with. And then for Mencius, really it's the process of learning to become human, right? There's this process. So maybe what we need is rules plus kind of, you could say, Aristotle's promises, then the kind of moral sentiment. And Nicholas Bogurin, the founder of the Bogurin Institute, argued that maybe we should just do with artificial intelligence like we do with children, right? Raise them in the kind of environment. That's how we can guarantee it. But still, I think that's still limited, because we know that we produce very bad children as well, right? And so it's not very reliable. And also, if we do that, why don't we just pay attention to how to raise babies, right? So I don't know why it doesn't work anymore. So I'll just so going back to the AI challenge, I think the AI challenge, not AGI, just basic AI challenge is still very important because we can use it together with other things to create threats. But some threats I think are exaggerated. We now say AI work. Cell phones take people away, take children away from nature and society. But what nature do you mean? I think we humans are trying to stay away from nature throughout the human existence, right? And so when I hear people complaining that all this technology take people away from children away from nature and society, oftentimes they think the kind of nature they experience is something everyone has to experience, right? I think our life experience always change. So I think those threats are. I'm not saying that those threats are not real, but they're not well defined. I think two threats are very clear and very well defined. One is educational challenge, right? So it seems that nowadays a lot of things can be done by AI. So what kind of just very quickly? So what kind of things we can do for that? So we talk about creative education, but to me, I think the AI challenge means that we need to strengthen the basic education. Things people can remember, can recite, can do well. Because science, math, science, and literacy are what we can go back to recreate ourselves. Now this kind of creative education, I think is exaggerated. The other issue is which stagnation, which Nathan mentioned. How do we deal with this? So in my own work, I argue that maybe democracy has a fundamental limit to deal with that issue because the masses tend to have this kind of reaction of technology. So maybe we need compassionate elites, right? And kind of compassionate elitism as an answer to this kind of challenge. So I'll stop here. Thank you.